back to my channel. Today we are going to do part 1 of the many faces of love on this new teaching series. I'm so excited. If you are new to my channel, welcome to Eileen into Spirit. My name is Eileen. I'm a spiritual advisor, intuitive coach, and I provide you with guidance, wisdom, and inspiration every week right here on this channel. Okay, Spirit fam, we're going to get right into it. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be part 1 on the Many Faces of Love series. Now, I want to let you know that this came up in the midst of having a conversation with my wife about what transpired during the day at one point. Now, as many of you know, I'm a psychic intuitive. And I do many readings for many individuals on a daily basis. I am actually a psychic advisor for a very large platform. I will not divulge any more than that because I'm not allowed to, but I do a lot of readings, okay? And I want you to know that 95% of the readings that I do are based on love and relationships. And that is a fact. It is a very common question that I get on a daily basis pertaining to, what does the relationship look like? Is the relationship going to progress? Is it going to go further? Does this individual love me? Is this person in love with me? Does this person have feelings for me? I mean, those are the constant questions. And in the midst of having this conversation with my wife, it brought up some very good points that me as a spiritual teacher often feel myself guiding these individuals and my clients and teaching them the reasonings behind certain situations when it pertains to love and relationships and what the deep spiritual meaning is behind all of it. Today, I want to talk to you just about that. I want to talk to you about the many faces of love, why it's important, and why I want to talk about it now. And the reason I want to talk about it now is because we are currently in a time where we as a collective are having to learn to rise our standards. We're having to rise up to a higher standard of love and truly understanding a higher standard of love, especially when it comes to relationships. Okay. Now, I want you to know that I do have notes in front of me. So occasionally you will see me look down because I'm trying to remember where I am and where I'm going. Okay. So now, I want to point out that many of us really think that love is simple, right? Many of us think that once we're in a relationship, everything's going to be dandy, everything's going to be happy, and it usually does. It usually starts off that way. But I want to reassure you that love is very complex. It has many different faces, it has many different forms, and it comes in many different ways. So we have to look at it from all angles and really look at it from a higher perspective. This is why I'm coming to you now, to sort of help you lean into your own spiritual understanding on rising to a higher standard of love, okay? So in understanding that, know that we have things such as conditional love. We have unconditional love. Then we have, when you love someone or when you are in love with someone. They're entirely different things. Those are the many different phases, right? Now, I really like to consider myself what I like to call an overachiever when it comes to relationships. And I say that because I have lots of experience with different types of relationships throughout my life. Now, note that I am not an expert in this field whatsoever. I do not have a degree in or a license in relationship therapy. This is just based off of my own personal experience and my own understanding in my meditations and my channelings with the angels and the ascended masters. And when I say I'm an overachiever, it's because of the many different types of relationships that I've had and the many different types of lessons and experiences I've gone through throughout the years. But note that I'm still human. And note that I'm still learning, okay? We learn every day, okay? Now, most of the people that I read for, I would sort of classify them into two different categories. The first category that we're going to talk about today is going to be those individuals that are in relationships and struggle, okay? The struggling types of relationships. Now, I want to point out that there is no such thing, first and foremost, there is no such thing as a perfect relationship. So if you are trying to build a perfect relationship, note that it does not exist. A relationship, and especially when it pertains to love, you have to work at it. It takes consistency, it takes effort, and it takes equal accountability from both individuals, okay? Now, the second category is going to be those individuals who are not in a relationship but are really desiring and wanting a relationship. But we're going to focus on part one today, okay? Now, today is going to be a topic on in relationships, individuals who are in relationships. Now, when you first get into a relationship, everything starts out like you're excited, you're giddy, you're happy, you're just goo goo gaga over everything, right? And as time goes on, because we're so happy and we're so elated and we want to spend as much time as we possibly can with this individual, we end up compromising who we are for someone else. Now, I need you to understand that even in a good, healthy relationship, you have to set boundaries, okay? And I say that because you have to understand that you cannot compromise who you are for someone else. And I feel a lot of times we end up doing that, not really truly understanding what's happening or what's transitioning, but because it feels so good to be in that place, we want to stay there. We want to continue feeling that same type of emotion. And when we compromise who we are, we lose ourselves completely. We no longer speak our truth. We're too afraid to speak up, to say what we don't like, because we would rather make the other person happy in the relationship than to sacrifice a potential of either upsetting them or having them just sort of shove us off to the side, okay? Now, compromising yourself in a relationship is not healthy. This is why boundaries are so important, okay? And when I mention boundaries in a relationship, what I'm wanting you to identify with here is recognize that there is a beginning and an end to you, and there is also a beginning and an end to the other person in this relationship. Now, the perfect example I can give you from my own personal experience is my first boyfriend. And this was my first experience in an actual love relationship. And because it was my first boyfriend and because I was 15 years old, I was very brand new. I didn't have very good role models that really could explain to me the dynamics of a relationship or the dynamic of love. I didn't have that type of relationship with my mother that I can openly communicate with her on this specific topic. So I literally compromised my own needs and my own desires for my boyfriend at the time. I did whatever he wanted to do. I never voiced what I desired or what I wanted. I never allowed that to happen. I always sacrificed my own voice to make him happy. And I did whatever he wanted to do to make him happy. And as the relationship continued to develop, and it continued to develop in a very toxic way, that just became very habit forming. It came to a point that it was just second nature for me to compromise my own truth in that relationship at all cost. Now, fast forward several years when I'm with my now said wife, and it made me realize that, my wife would always compromise her needs and her desires to make me happy. She would only want to do what I wanted to do. It was never about what she wanted to do. And I had to put a stop to that right at the beginning, because you have to have an equal balance in these relationships in order for you to understand where you begin and where this other individual ends, right? You have to have that equal balance. When you identify that by setting specific boundaries, by recognizing that you have to have equal time and space, you have to have time with the individual, but you also have to set aside time for yourself to hear yourself think, to really understand what it is that you're desiring, what you're needing in this specific relationship. Because what ends up happening is individuals you end up becoming one single entity, right? And then it's no longer about you, it's about them. And that's how we end up developing toxic habits, toxic behaviors, and toxic relationships. And a lot of times we compromise ourselves. We compromise our truths. We compromise our needs and our wants because we have a very great fear of being rejected, being abandoned, or being alone. Now, rejection, abandonment, those are topics that will be discussed at a later time in another series. But I need you to sort of understand and just hear it all in one big perspective, okay? So if we know that we compromise our truths and our needs and our desires in relationships because we're wanting to make the other individual happy, because there is a specific fear that we have associated with not giving the other person something or not satisfying their needs or their desires, okay? Now, I want to also point out that this is very important, that I think a lot of times people get very confused when it comes to relationships. I need you to understand, and Spirit and the angels and the ascended masters make this very clear. Every person that comes into your life to teach you a specific lesson, okay? Know and understand that every person, especially those that you build relationships with, you have soul contracts with these individuals. Now, I know that it might be really hard for you to sort of wrap your brain around, but you specifically created a soul contract with that individual to come into your life at a specific time to help you grow spiritually and help you understand who you are at a much deeper level. And they're there to help you learn a specific lesson, okay? Now, lessons, the way that I look at lessons when it comes to relationships and love is really based off of toxic relationships. They can be karmic relationships. It could be, any forms of abuse, any form of mental, physical, emotional, any type of fears that have sort of been imprinted on you, okay? Now, understand that when we get to a point in relationships where we compromise and we no longer identify with where you begin and where the other individual ends, so forth and so on, and you're compromising, you end up becoming very miserable in this relationship. And I have found that in all of the readings that I've done, most of these individuals are actually staying in these miserable relationships because of a fear that has sort of kept them strapped and mobilized in this one space of, well, at least I have this, okay? Again, you're compromising your own happiness. You're compromising your own needs and your own desires by being stagnant in that relationship that you are not happy in, okay? I think that in the beginning, when we get into relationships, we have a really wild idea. And I think part of the reason is that Hollywood has really sort of beautified relationships, right? We all have those stories where Mr. Perfect, Mrs. Right or Mrs. Perfect. We all have that ideal of what kind of a relationship we're wanting, but we never take the time to sit down and really ask ourselves deep questions that are required when getting into a relationship. Instead, we get so carried away that when someone enters our life and we're excited and we're like, this is a new feeling, I want to hold on to this and strap onto it as best as I can, and you just go with it. And what ends up happening is you end up settling for less than you deserve, okay? Now, as you're in this relationship, now I'm not saying that all relationships end up miserable. That's not what I'm saying. This is specifically for those individuals, because I really feel that right now, the time that we've entered, and with all of the planetary alignments and energy shifts that have been happening astrologically, there are so many people right now that are evaluating their relationships. They're evaluating the individuals in their lives. And this is why this topic is coming up now. Because now it's time for you to lean into your own spiritual understanding of what kind of relationships and what kind of love you currently have in your life right now, and how you go about changing that. So as you continue to compromise yourself in relationships, we ignore everything, right? We end up staying stagnant in these miserable relationships that are toxic, and we ignore all of the red flags. We ignore our intuition. We ignore the signs and all of the information that individuals around us can clearly see. We ignore it because we keep telling ourselves that's not true. Even though there might be a part of you, that inner part of you, that gut part of you that says, this might be right, but you refuse to identify it. You refuse to look at it. You refuse to see the truth of it, okay? Now, as you go through this experience, right, in these relationships, you ignore all of these red flags. You ignore all of these signs because you want to hold on to it, because you would rather hold on to it than face the fear of being alone, or face the fear or the idea of being rejected or abandoned, whichever it might be, right? But I want you to understand that in all relationships, there has to be balance, as I mentioned earlier, right? One of the biggest questions I often get whenever someone reaches out to me for a love reading when it pertains to relationships, and I'll tell you, out of the 95% of the calls that I get, or the readings that I get, they're all based on love and relationships. Nearly half of that 95% are individuals that are stuck in a relationship that is so toxic that they refuse to see the truth of it. And the only reason they stay in it is because they're afraid of being alone. Even though they know in their heart that that individual does not love them or is not in love with them. They just would rather stay than face the fear of being alone. Now, one of the biggest questions I get is, does this person love me? I need you all to understand there is a very big difference between loving someone and being in love with someone. When you love someone, you honor them. Now, understand that love comes in many forms. You have conditional love and you have unconditional love, right? And I really feel that a lot of us don't truly understand what unconditional love is. I think a lot of us really love on a very superficial level. We love individuals based off of how they look, how they act, how they perceive themselves, the things that they do, but we don't really truly see the person. You don't see the person. You only love them based off of what you perceive of them, what you think of them, but you don't truly love them wholeheartedly or unconditionally. When you can truly be in love with someone, you see them for who they are. You admire them. Nothing else around you supersedes that spark that you see within them. You see their flaws. You see everything about them. That is what being in love with someone is. Nothing else matters when you are in love with someone. They could be the most, it doesn't matter. They could have so many different flaws, but you find the good in those flaws. You find those things, you admire them, and you see them for who they really are. You have no preconceived judgments of who they are, right? You don't base that love and that affection based on past experiences with that individual. It's very hard to sort of explain that, but that is the truth and the dynamic. Many of the relationships, many of the way that we love individuals is very superficial, and it's on a very conditional level. It's not on an unconditional level. It's all encompassing, right? And it's important that you understand the very big difference between those two things. And I feel that because we've entered a time now where lots of relationships are sort of looking very differently now. I say this because how many times have you been on social media where you've seen a couple, one person could be completely fit and then the other person could be like overweight, right? How many times have you been on social media and you've gone down to the comments to see what people have said about that, right? And they comment about how that fat person should not be with that fit person because that, it just doesn't match, right? That is superficial love. That right there is conditional love. It is not unconditional love. And the higher standard of love that is coming in now, that we are rising to, that we need to learn to lean in towards, is a very unconditional love. It is a love of a much higher standard that doesn't see the person as they are on the outside. They see the person for who they are on the inside. Understand that what we are moving towards is a love of energy. It's where vibrationally, the energy that you emit out is the energy that you bring in. Now, this is important, okay? Because, and we'll cover a little bit more about that energy stuff in part 2, okay? But understand that energy is energy, okay? And the way that we look at energy spiritually, and the way that the angels and the ascended masters really talk about energy, is it's based off of vibration. They often refer to it as frequency. So the vibration that you emit out into the world, into the people around you, that is the type of energy that gets sent back to you. The energy that you give is the energy that you receive. It's an equal exchange. And I want to point out that where are you imbalanced when it comes to your love and your relationships? Now, understand that relationships doesn't have to automatically be romantic relationships. This can be relationships of all kind, because if you have a relationship in your life, love is involved in some form or fashion in that type of a relationship. Understand that first and foremost. Secondly, learn to identify what lesson that individual is bringing towards you, right? So identify what it is you need to learn. Instead of being in a relationship where you feel this person does this to me, learn to flip that just a little bit and say, what is this person teaching me? What am I not being aware of that this person is trying to reflect back to me that I need to become more aware of? So, understand that when you're in a relationship and you have toxicity and you have the preconceived perceptions of what that individual is or who that individual is, recognize that there are so many different things that play into how the energy that you give out comes back to you. There's so much more that gets involved in it. And I think a lot of times when individuals get into relationships, they don't really allow themselves the time to really reflect, right? They have no balance, they have no boundaries in that relationship. So it's like they don't really know how to interpret or figure out what needs to be put into the relationship to help them grow. I think one of the biggest downfalls in a lot of relationships from my own personal experience and the many people I've coached is a lack of communication in relationships. That is primary, a lack of communication, where the individuals don't properly communicate with each other. And I think primarily that's because each individual is compromising. They are compromising who they are. They're not speaking their truth in that relationship and allowing themselves to truly be seen for who they are. Because what they are seeing in that other individual is they're just seeing what that other individual truly thinks of them, what they perceive of them. Again, back to the conditional love. So how do we go from balance? How do we fix? What is the solution to creating balance and boundaries in a relationship? Number one, keep in mind that you have your own sword of truth, okay? Now, and we're going to talk a little bit about some cards that I pulled from a very high frequency deck. The deck that I will be using for a lot of this series is going to be The Secret Language of Light by Denise Jarvie. And it's called Transmissions for the Soul. I will link it down in the description box if you feel so inclined to purchase your own copy. As you go along on this journey to self-discovery. Because this deck by far has been the most helpful for me in really helping individuals become more in tune with their own inner voice, their own inner guidance. And that was the whole point of I Lean Into Spirit, to help you lean into your own spirit. So, let go. Now notice how this is a sword. And right here on this sword, it says truth. What I love about this, the solution to this when it comes to relationships, is that you have your own sword of truth. You need to sort of let go of the things you cannot control and take your power back. Now, what it says here in this book, and this is what I love, it says, take back your power and thrive. Let all just be and take back your light. Stop trying so hard and breathe. Letting go does not mean jumping blindly into faith, but to release the resistance you hold about a subject. And in this case, it's going to be love. Okay? Letting go does not mean jumping blindly into faith. Okay? Which is what I said earlier. I feel a lot of us just jump right into it. We don't really think about it. We just jump right into it. Okay? But to release the resistance you hold about love, so your dreams and desires can be released. Now, what is it that you're resisting in a relationship? And I feel for many people, what you're resisting is the fear. You're resisting facing that fear of being alone, being abandoned, being neglected, being whatever it might be. That is the resistance. Okay? For some of you, it could be a resistance of setting boundaries. Really think about that. Okay. Now, here we go. We have all hung on to a person we think will give us what we seek. This is beautiful. We have all hung on to a person we think that will give us what we seek. And in this particular case, we all hang on to these toxic, imbalanced relationships because we resist feeling that fear, but also because we feel that they're going to give to us what we internally are seeking. But hanging on is a result of unbalanced thinking. This imbalance has you needing compensation. You created a deficit by compromising yourself, thinking that was a way toward your dreams. It was your choice to do that. Now, it is your choice to let go and create from love instead of fear. You deserve to have what you want without compromising your truth. You cannot change what has occurred. However, you can change what you do from this moment on. No one has been placed upon this earth to make you happy. Just as it is not your responsibility to make anyone else happy. Free yourself and everyone else of the idea that we must please others to be loved. You are love, and you are loved, no matter what has happened in your life. Now, I absolutely and positively love this. I love this more than you could possibly even imagine. So what I'm going to leave you with here, my wonderful spirit fam, really allow yourself to go back and listen to this message. Allow it to really sink in. Because I can tell you from my own experience, being someone who grew up being rejected and abandoned by nearly everyone that she loved wholeheartedly. The only thing I ever really wanted was to be loved. But you see, I compromised myself to make others happy. I bent over backwards for others because I hoped and I believed that by doing that, they would love me in return. But it wasn't until I realized that by me compromising myself, by me bending over backwards for them day in and day out, I wasn't giving myself the love that I needed. So if you have an imbalanced relationship, it's time that you really ask yourself these deep questions. Really identify what it is you're resisting. Really ask yourself, what are you worth? What do you deserve? Because Spirit knows that you deserve everything that you desire and so much more. And I feel that for you as well. So if you are seeking love, pure, unconditional love, you can give that to yourself, my friend. It is within you. And I'm going to help you get there, one step at a time. So, this is where we end. And I look forward to seeing you next time for part 2, as we continue this journey towards the many faces of love. Love and light to you all. Namaste, guys.